You send a message and then you wait, and then you read it again. Was it too much? Was the tone off? Should you have waited longer before hitting send? You close the app, you open it again, you close it. Or maybe it is 11:47 at night. Nothing bad happened today, but your brain just pulled up something you said in a meeting. 6 years ago, 11 words. You cannot even remember if anyone reacted, but your brain kept the receipt. Here is what everyone gets wrong about this. They call it a thinking problem, a glitch, a flaw. But what if your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do? What if it is doing it brilliantly before anything else? You're not broken. The word overthinking gets used like it is a character flaw, like some people got the quiet version of a brain, and you ended up with the loud one that never shuts off. That is not what is happening here. You do not have a faulty mind. You have a very active one, and there is a real reason it works this way. A biological reason, a deeply human reason. Your brain learned to think like this because thinking like this once kept you safe. Maybe it still does in ways you have not noticed yet. Notice when the overthinking is loudest. It is almost always right before something matters, a conversation you need to have, a decision you cannot undo. A moment where getting it wrong feels like it would cost you something real. That is not random. That is your brain running simulations. Every what if is the mind trying to build a safety net out of thought. Think of a chess player who keeps running through moves after the game is already over. That is not obsession. That is a trained pattern. The brain that rehearses consequences obsessively is the brain that grew up somewhere consequences were unpredictable. Maybe moods shifted without warning when you were young. Maybe reading the room was not optional. It was survival. The overthinking did not appear from nowhere. It was learned, it was useful, it protected you, and some part of you still believes it will. There is a specific kind of overthinking that does not happen about random things. It happens about the right things, at the wrong volume. It happens when you care, when the outcome matters to you, when the stakes feel personal. Psychologists call this hyper-responsibility. It is the belief that you are responsible not just for your own actions, but for how other people experience your actions. It looks like rewriting a text 4 times. It looks like scripting both sides of a conversation before it happens. It looks like apologizing in advance for things you have not done yet. Think about someone who was told they were too much growing up, too loud, too emotional, too sensitive. They did not stop feeling things. They just started editing themselves constantly. Every word pre-screened, every silence analyzed. That is not anxiety, that is hypervigilance, and it makes complete sense when you understand where it came from. You are working so hard, constantly, to get things right. The brain just does not always tell you when to stop. Here is something that does not get said enough. Overthinking is not always about solving the problem. Sometimes it is about staying close to the problem. Because as long as you're still thinking about it, you have not had to decide. And as long as you have not decided, you cannot be wrong yet. This is called uncertainty intolerance. The mind loops not because it is searching for an answer, but because it is avoiding the discomfort of not having one. Thinking about it constantly creates the feeling of doing something, of being in motion, of working on it. It is, in a strange way, a form of control. You recognize this feeling, lying in bed, replaying a decision you already made, not because you're going to change it, but because you have not made peace with the uncertainty of having made it. That is not irrationality. That is a nervous system that was never taught that not knowing is survivable. So it keeps thinking, hoping more thought will produce the certainty that thought alone cannot give. But here's the part nobody tells you. The overthinking is not the enemy. It never was. The thoughts are not attacking you. They are trying to reach you. They are trying to say something about what you value, what you're afraid to lose, what still feels unresolved. The problem is not that your brain is loud. The problem is that it was never given permission to stop. And there is one more layer to this, one that changes everything. When you replay a conversation, really replay it word by word, studying it like evidence. Ask yourself what you're actually looking for. You are usually looking for proof that you are okay, that you did not mess it up, that the relationship is still safe, that the other person still sees you the way you need to be seen. This is where attachment comes in. People who grew up with inconsistent emotional responses, love that was warm one day and cold the next, often developed what is called an anxious attachment style. Their nervous system learned that connection is fragile, that you have to monitor it constantly, or it might slip away. Overthinking in this context is surveillance. The mind trying to keep watch over the relationships that matter, scanning for signs of distance, replaying interactions to check for damage. And the painful part, the very behavior that is trying to protect the connection, is often the thing that strains it. But that does not mean the impulse was wrong. It means the system was doing what it knew. Not all overthinking is emotional. Some of it is simply cognitive overload. Some brains process more. They pick up more signals, they register more detail, They notice what is happening between the lines of a conversation. That is not a disorder. That is a trait, and it comes with a cost. There is more incoming data than most systems were built to manage. Imagine living in a city where the volume is always turned up. Not wrong, just more. More noise, more input, more sensation. You would spend a lot of energy just filtering. You would get tired in ways other people do not understand, and your thoughts would keep talking even after you asked them to stop. People like this describe their minds as a browser with too many tabs open, not because they are weak, because they are wired to take in more. The mind that will not quiet down is not failing. It is coping with a volume that most people cannot hear. Overthinking does not look the same at every age. At 20, it lives in social spaces, what people think of you, whether you belong, whether you said the right thing. The mind is still building its identity. Overthinking is part of that calibration. At 30, it moves inward. It becomes about choices, career, relationships, paths not taken. The mind is not just worrying about perception anymore. It is asking whether your life is going where you meant it to go. The behavior does not vanish. The target shifts. What changes is what the mind is protecting, what it is afraid to lose, and as life grows more complex, the thinking grows with it. Not because the person is more broken, but because they have more at stake. This is not a habit you outgrow. It is a pattern that matures with you. At its core, overthinking is regulation. It is the mind trying to manage what it cannot control. When things feel uncertain, the thinking kicks in. Not to solve the uncertainty, but to reduce the discomfort of sitting inside it. The loop of thought is like a blanket, not because it is warm, because it is familiar. As long as the mind is doing something, it does not have to feel the full weight of not knowing. The repeated thought is an anchor. The mental rehearsal is a preparation ritual. The replayed conversation is an attempt to find, after the fact, the control you did not have in the moment. None of these are solutions. They all feel like home, and the nervous system returns to them again and again. Not out of weakness, out of loyalty, because these patterns were built out of something real. They were built to handle something real. And even when the original threat is gone, the pattern stays. Like furniture in a house you do not live in anymore, the thought loops are the way your mind learned to feel less alone with itself. So here you are, a person who thinks too much, according to some invisible standard of how much thinking is allowed. But look at what that thinking reveals. It reveals that you care about getting things right, that relationships matter to you, that you take your own impact on people seriously, that you feel things at a depth most people never admit to. The overthinking is not separate from who you are. It is part of who you are. The same part that notices beauty in small things, that remembers details others forget, that stays with people in the quiet ways that matter. You did not choose this. You built it slowly. Out of everything you lived through, and the mind that will not let go is not punishing you. It is holding on to everything it learned, to every lesson it collected, to every moment it was trying to keep you safe inside of. That is not a flaw. That is a mind that has never stopped trying. And maybe for now, that is enough to know